Hello and welcome to the All India Polity Challenge. This is a very important and serious challenge which I want you to undertake. And with this challenge, you'll actually be covering a lot of ground in the content in the syllabus itself, which is very directly going to help you in the examination. This entire challenge and everything that I'll tell you in this video is designed and intended for one thing, and that one thing is to help you score as many marks as possible in the prelims from Indian Polity section. The reason we are starting from this I have discussed in previous videos. You can go back and check those out. We have a detailed masterclass on polity which will help you with the conceptual foundations of it. But it's time to get into some details and actually cover more ground and to prepare ourselves really for what's coming, and that examination which you will face in the next few days, or perhaps if your attempt is a little while away in the future, then in a few months you will end up facing a certain quality and a certain difficulty level of questions in the UPSC. I'm going to walk you through these type of questions in the recent question paper of the UPSC. We'll analyze them. I'm going to hand over to you the PYQ Analyzer tool which I have designed for you, and then I'm going to throw open this Indian Polity Challenge, All India Polity Challenge for you. So listen carefully to what's coming, because we are going to cover a lot of ground. What I will tell you now will lay the foundation of your tasks, should you choose to accept this challenge, for the next few weeks. And if you follow the intended schedule for this thing, then you will end up covering a very large portion of Indian polity to a degree of finality and precision, such that the only thing after that will be left for you is to revise. You'll do everything that you require to do, and I'll tell you I have structured it in a very clear set of tasks which will really help you, and you won't get lost and you won't go on tangents, and you will know exactly what you have to do to make sure the questions that you face in the examination are approachable and that you are able to figure those out. So this is one from the previous year question, and there are two types of questions you will encounter in the previous year questions. And this is the type of question that you can expect every year. Either the question will be conceptual, or the question will be memory based, or perhaps it will be both. So take for instance, this is an interesting question just a few months ago was asked in the examination, which are the following factors constitutes the best safeguard of liberty in a liberal democracy. Now this is not a factual question. This is not a memory based question. It's a great example of a conceptual question when certain fundamental ideals of the Constitution, especially those listed in the preamble and the directive principle of state policy and all of those basic fundamental bedrock texts of the Constitution are being asked, and your conceptual clarity for that ideal of liberty is being tested. So which is the best safeguard, it says. It doesn't say which is the only safeguard. It doesn't want to ask you about a particular provision or a constitutional body or a procedure or the name of an article or anything. It just wants to ask you and figure out if you have understood what the idea of liberty is in a liberal democracy is, and how the Constitution, at least in India, is able to differentiate it and safeguard it. So the correct answer, in my opinion, is separation of powers, which is the fundamental bedrock of liberal democracy, in fact, and the way our entire Constitution and the Indian polity is designed. So that is a topic which we'll get into and we'll figure out, but the essence of the question, you see, is conceptual. And the reason I wanted to show you this one is that you should realize that the UPSC will not shy away from asking you conceptual questions in the prelims, right? And so one must be prepared for both. The other type of dimension on which the questions will be asked, either they will be very easy, although that is not going to be very common. There will be some easy questions. I'll give you some examples. There will be some hard questions. There will be some medium questions. Most questions are going to be medium difficulty. Few will be hard and few will be easy, right? And an example of a hard question is this one. Again, very recent question, and it wants to ask you and determine if you can differentiate between the finer points of the MP-LAD scheme, and it is a scheme about which you will read inevitably in polity when you go deep enough. Now the difficulty is that not only do you need to know about the scheme, you need to know about it in some detail so that you can differentiate the ones which apply to it and the ones which don't. So I will regard this as the hard question, because Number one, it is from a little bit of a fringe area. It is not a question about fundamental rights or the basic structure of the constitution, which you can expect to understand. So this is an advanced question from a fringe area and also extremely detailed, right? The level of detail and the area itself makes it a hard question. Some questions like these will come. You do not need to worry about it or target them or intimidated by them or chase them at all. What you need to do is figure out the medium level and the easy level questions and make sure those you are getting at a very good accuracy rate. Don't miss even a single one of them. And we'll figure out some ways to make sure that that happens. So an example of a medium level question is this one. The preamble of the Constitution is, what is it? Now it might sound very easy, but it's not so easy because this question is assuming that you know what the present situation of the preamble is. You see, it has had a legal history, and it's a question I asked you in the previous assignment of polity, if you remember. What is the legal status of the preamble as of today? As of today, is it a part of the Constitution which has no legal effect? Is it not a part of the Constitution? Does it have the same effect as the Constitution? Is it considered a part of the Constitution? Is it justiciable? All of those, that is the fundamental debate in this chapter about the preamble actually, right? It's the thing which is the conceptual part of this entire debate about how enforceable it really is, right? And it's a very interesting legal debate. This debate you will find mentioned in every book of polity, whether you read D.T. Basu or you read Lakshmikant or whatever book you choose to read. This is the essential conceptual part. And it can only be understood after the chapter has been read. Again, notice, no one is asking about articles of the Constitution. Although some questions may be very easy and may ask you a few pinpointed, very direct, easy type of questions, but they are not very common. And one should never rely on them. So the reason that we are differentiating these according to the level of difficulty is for you to have some feedback about your level of preparation. I will give you the PYQ Analyzer tool and I'll walk you through the entire thing to make sure you understand, and so that you will be able to do the PYQ analysis for not only polity but for everything. And the whole idea of this PYQ Analyzer is to figure out, not from the previous year questions whether you know the questions or not. That's not at all important. The important thing is what type of questions are expected. Therefore, by knowing that, how can your preparation be geared to make sure those questions are targeted? We don't want to spend a lot of time memorizing all the articles of the Constitution or all the amendments that have happened in the Constitution, making sure we get the dates right and be making sure getting the years right, because those questions are not likely to be asked. This is the type of question that they're going to ask because it requires a deeper level of analysis and memory also, with of course implicit in it. An example of an easy question: which are the following categories of fundamental rights incorporated against untouchability as a form of discrimination? Now, when you read the chapter on fundamental rights, you will figure out which one it is. I'm not going to tell you because it is for you to find out. It's very easy. It is right there in the beginning of the chapter itself. You can figure it out. So I'm going to now take both of these dimensions, difficulty of the question as well as memory or conceptual, and I'm going to put it in a framework for you, and I'm going to give you the task to complete the previous year question analyzer. I'm going to show you what that analyzer looks like in just a minute. So this is what the PYQ Analyzer for Indian Polity looks like. I will send this to you in your email. You will have access to the Word document so that it can be edited as per your requirements. It contains the question. The questions are from previous year question papers of the UPSC, very recent ones. Don't worry about where they're from. But here's what you need to do. You will see the question here. You need to find what the correct answer is. This is not a test. This is a tool, and this tool is designed to tell you something. I want you to find out what the answer is. If you are absolutely sure about what the answer is, write it, good for you. And also mention the difficulty level you think that answer is, that question belongs to. So in my opinion, this is probably medium or easy. I'll give it medium. Does it require memory or conceptual understanding, or does it require both? I think this is memory based entirely. And which chapter of the Indian Polity, whether of D.T. Basu or whatever book you require or you refer to, does it belong to? So this is definitely from the Directive Principles of State Policy. In fact, the correct answer is this one. Directive Principles of State Policy is where the idea of the concentration of wealth is mentioned, and So knowing this you should be able to solve this question, and even if you do not know this, I want you to reverse engineer it, figure out where this is mentioned, even if it takes time. I want you to figure out the correct answer. Think of this whole thing like a open book test. The second question, similar. It asks you about the right to property in India, and like we discussed, which status does it enjoy right now, right? And so the correct answer happens to be B here, and I mentioned before that it belongs to the medium category in my opinion. You might differ, and that's completely okay. You can do that. Memory versus conceptual, in my opinion, it is a memory-based question, although there is some conceptual understanding required to understand how the right to property became and enjoy the status that it does, and it is in the fundamental rights chapter, and in fact it's a very important and favorite question because it was the reason a long battle between the government and the judiciary was fought over the status of the fundamental rights. Now all of that you will figure out, but the idea is that the questions are arranged this, and this is like this, and I want you to fill out this PYQ Analyzer according to the table that I mentioned. I don't want to know how many you got correct. I really don't care. All I want you to do, all I care about is for you to figure out and start to analyze these questions from the point of view of really helping you in the exam. I want you to extract value from it, and the way to do that is to ask yourself these questions that it is asking you when you see the question. This is what you should be doing with every previous year question when you analyze. Don't just treat it as some test to figure out which level you are at. Figure out which level the question is at, and then figure out where your preparation is, how you need to make sure that you scale it enough to approach these questions so that you get at least the medium and the difficult ones on bullseye, on command. Whenever the medium and the hard questions are asked, you should be able to pinpoint those out and get them with a very, very high level of accuracy. Now we come to the modality of the challenge itself and exactly the steps that you will need to follow to complete it. But I should mention that the first and the only reason that I have designed this challenge and that we are talking about this is because I want you to cover the content with finality. I want you to make sure that when you are investing the time in something, which in this case is polity, that it is over, that it is done with, and those medium and easy level questions are within your grasp all the time, 100% of the time. I don't want you to miss even one of them when they appear in the examination, as they inevitably will. So what exactly do you need to do to make sure that a chapter is covered from all dimensions in the shortest possible amount of time, given that there isn't much time anyway to cover all of this content? And that is what this entire challenge is about. Let's never forget that. It's not about the challenge, it's about covering the syllabus very intelligently, very efficiently, and to make sure that by the end of the day, whether or not you're perfect, that you're better than almost everyone else so that you can clear this exam. This is exactly what your mission is. It's not perfection. How do you do this stuff? In this challenge, I will be giving you a list of chapters. You will have chapters from polity, which will be listed out, which will come in packets. Maybe you will be given 7 chapters or 5, or depending on the heaviness and the difficulty level of those chapters. For every chapter, you have to do 3 things. For every chapter, you have to do 3 things. The first thing is that you need to capture the entire conceptual part of that chapter in one single page. This is an example of that. This is an example of the basic structure of the Constitution, that chapter, and it has been captured in one page with all the relevant information. There is no need for you to make anything colorful or sophisticated or any designs like this at all. Just make whatever you feel is convenient and better, to the effect that when you revisit it, it should be there with you in one chapter. Now, the important thing with this type, making this type of flow chart or this type of a diagram or any structure like that, is that we are not concerned with the extremely particularly detailed memory based content there. Okay, if I read something, and let us take the example of fundamental duties. Fundamental duties will be our example in the template. Let's say I'm reading this from this book or any book that you might prefer, and there is right at the outset a lot of detail. It starts off by telling me that the idea of the duties comes from the Constitution of the USSR, and it distinguishes between, talks about the Japanese Constitution as well, and how the idea of fundamental rights and duties is different in the constitution of the USSR versus India, and then it starts about the history of it and how it started with the Swaran Singh committee and some interesting recommendations that that committee had made which were not included in the fundamental duty. So that's something I just take note of, and I'll tell you why I take note of that. It then goes on to list the fundamental duties themselves. Now this is of course the conceptual, the memory part, purely the memory part. Then it talks about the features of these fundamental duties, then the criticisms and the significance. Now this is the conceptual part. Okay, this is the part, the entire conceptual narrative is what I want you to capture in this one single flowchart. It may be like this, it may not be. You can choose whatever format you perhaps are more comfortable with, mind maps or flowcharts, whatever format, it does not matter. It should be in one page, it should be legible, it should be such that all the relevant conceptual details have been captured there. I don't care about very detailed lists or too many dates or too many facts, because we'll deal with them separately. Entire conceptual narrative can be captured in one page. That's what you have to do in this first step. Okay, so the first step is this. The second step is of course the memory component, and in the chapter of the fundamental duties, for example, the memory component is of course the list of fundamental duties themselves, and they are important and I can figure that out obviously. So I need to know what they are, and although they may or may not ask which exactly type of duty corresponds to which article, it would be nice to know and I would feel confident in knowing it. So I would prefer to memorize this list of fundamental duties in some detail. I should know exactly which ones, what type of duties there are. I should at least be able to distinguish between them. And if somebody asks me, is this a fundamental duty and it isn't in the list, then I should be able to at least say that no, this is not one of them. And I should be able to have that level of recognition at least. How do I do that? In the memory part of it. In every chapter, wherever you find the factual memory-based detailed content, create a mnemonic right there and then. Okay, create an intelligent mnemonic, create a short mnemonic, capture it, write that mnemonic down or draw it, whatever you need to do, but make sure that it is there. Okay, and this takes care of the memory part. Every chapter, this is going to come, and for every chapter, you're going to do this. Okay, and the third thing is the most important. The third thing is I want you to run a search on the internet on the chapter that you are researching, on the chapter that you are covering, on the chapter that I have sent you as part of the list of chapters to be done. And what I want you to do is find one analytical chapter in the news from that particular issue. For example, if you are researching the chapter on emergency provisions, I have asked you to do all of these things for the chapter on emergency provisions of the Constitution. You created a flow chart, you created some mnemonics to make sure you understand what is an article, state emergency, what is a national emergency, all those things you captured, the details you got, basic emergency when they were imposed you captured in the mnemonics, and you are now figuring out this particular step. So in that step, all you'll do is you'll go to Google, you'll open Google, and you will type in emergency provisions in India, and then you will click on Google News. You will get a list of articles, or perhaps you may want to run a detailed search on the home page itself. Whatever you do, I want you to find out why that chapter was in the news recently and what analytical, critical analysis you can find. Let me give you an example here. So assume that I am doing this for the chapter on fundamental duties, which we have been discussing. And I just told you that I took note of something in the chapter. When I was reading this chapter, as you will also, you will notice that some recommendations were made by the Swaran Singh committee, and those recommendations were that let's make these fundamental duties enforceable, such that when they are not followed, penalties can be imposed. And this was not accepted, and it did not ultimately form part of the Article 51A, which was inserted as a result. But this struck me as interesting, and I did not know what type of debates around this topic are ongoing. So in the third step of the challenge, I was supposed to find out one analytical article on this issue. What I did was I just went on Google and I typed in fundamental duties here. Typed in fundamental duties India, clicked on Google News and see what comes up. What are the fundamental duties of Indian citizens? Supreme Court to look at enforcing fundamental duties. You see that issue which I had read, which the committee had recommended, is out here in the news and it is very recent. I click on it. and I figure out that there is quite an interesting contentious debate, very, very recent in fact. You see, the date is February the 22nd, 2022, and this is blocking me, but you can figure out that there has been a litigation. There has been recently a petition which has been filed in the Honorable Supreme Court, in which a idea of enforcing the fundamental duties, such that the violation of fundamental duties can be a penal offence as such, has been filed in the Supreme Court, and that debate has been sparked again. And you will also notice that that debate is associated with certain protests and certain events in the public sphere in India. For example, the petition also brought to the court's notice the growing trend of people blocking roads and highways while protesting, and said it is the need of the time to hit a balance between civic rights, liberties, freedom and civic obligations. You see, as the country has progressed, this issue of making the fundamental duties legally enforceable by the state, so that they're not just moral imperatives which have no legal enforceability or actual accountability is missing, has been sparked again. And this type of debate, this type of question is very, very likely to come in the prelims as well as the mains specifically. Okay, this is what I want you to do. So, as a summary, what does your chapter report contain? You will get a list of chapters. For every chapter you have to create a chapter report. 1. A conceptual mind map which captures all the relevant conceptual narrative details in one page only. 2. Any important memory mnemonics which you may require to memorize details which you have not been able to capture or are not memorized, which you think should be committed to memory, and a mnemonic for that you create there, and you have mentioned that in your report. Don't take more than half a page for this. 3rd, find me one analytical article in recent events, in recent debates about that chapter, whether that's emergency provisions, fundamental rights. You will find many in fundamental rights. Whether that's the parliament, and if you research that, you will find a lot of debate ongoing in the parliament. Whether that's public services, whether that is the right to freedom of religion, and the recent debate about anti-conversion bill, and all of those issues will crop up. And this is how you will figure out the dynamic currents and connect this static part to the dynamic part. Make sure your preparation is very thorough. At the end of the day, you will realize that that is the level of question they ask. So why not just simply prepare ourselves from the outset, given the fact that not a lot of time now remains. Okay, this is a lot of work, but it is time which will be well spent if you can invest it. Okay, if you have other plans ongoing, don't disturb them unnecessarily. Make sure that if your attempt is a few days to go and you have time, if you can spare the time, and if these chapters that I will be listing out are not as well prepared, you know the truth about that. I don't need to tell you. You already know whether they are well prepared or not, and if they are not, the PYQ Analyzer that I am sending you will be able to tell you how well prepared you are. If you are not well prepared, honest to God, then you should undertake this challenge. Make sure those chapters are done. It will make sure that you have at least 10-15 questions in the prelims from this section. They will certainly come, and you will be able to get them. Like I mentioned before, the incentives are very rich for this particular challenge, because it's going to require a lot of hard work. It will continue for a while. Every week we'll have some people winning it because they will have done a better job, a more concise job. I'll figure out who's doing what, but I want you to attempt it, and I want you to make sure that you try to capture it. I don't want you to invest more than 1 or 2 hours for every chapter. Maybe 2 hours, maybe 2.5 perhaps, because if you are a beginner, because the chapters themselves are not too long, and you'll be doing it in a very fast pace, and you'll be doing it sequentially in steps. You will read the chapter. That's the first thing you do. You will figure out what requires conceptual clarity, what I need to capture and extract. You will extract, you will create a flowchart. Then you will figure out if there are some very important memory based content that requires to be put in memory. You will create a mnemonic. You will Google that particular issue, that chapter head. You will figure out important debates about that ongoing. You will figure out one analytical article or editorial type article in which some critical analysis of that issue, whatever that might be, has been done, you will copy paste it. You will put this in a page or anything which you prefer, and that is your chapter report. You will create the chapter report for all the chapters that I am sending. No more than 2 to 3 hours should be invested in creating every one. But once those 2 to 3 hours are invested, that chapter will be done. You will realize because that we will have covered all the relevant issues, and although we haven't become scholars in polity or in the legal history of any of these issues, you will have captured exactly the type of questions in which your UPSC is likely to ask, and so your probability of capturing the low-hanging fruit, that medium to easy bracket, very high if you do this. Okay, this is the whole reason it's been designed this way, and I hope that you will make the most of it. It's going to be interesting and challenging, and I'll be really looking forward to your work on this. And this challenge is also something which should be a reflection to you of a number of things, including the question which is frequently asked, which is how do you make notes? The answer to that question, in a nutshell, is that you should make notes which help you revise as efficiently as possible from the point of view of the exam when the examination comes near. Notes should be a brevity, a summary, a snapshot of the entire content, such that the entire text does not need to be read again. That is the only point of making notes. One does not make notes or should not make notes to memorize the content, because for that much smarter and interesting techniques exist. And the UPSC is not particularly focused on the minutiae of all of these technical, factual based things, right? And so that's all I have for you for this challenge. We will commence this, and your time will be starting tonight. I hope that you are up to it, and I hope that you take pleasure in it as much as I have taken in creating it. And I will look forward to your responses, and I know that you will do very well and make me proud. Take care, and I will see you in a few days.